Before the world knew her name, before her words echoed through history, she was simply Anneliese Marie Frank, a young girl with dreams as boundless as the sky. Born in Frankfurt, Germany in 1929, a time of both promise and growing unease, Anne was a child of laughter and boundless curiosity, her spirit as bright as the summer sun. She possessed an infectious energy, a zest for life that drew people to her. Her family, Father Otto, a kind and thoughtful man, Mother Edith, a pillar of strength and quiet grace, and Sister Margot, intelligent and reserved, filled her world with warmth, love, and a sense of belonging. They were her anchor, her safe harbour in a world that was about to change forever. Anne loved stories, devouring books with insatiable hunger. She enjoyed movies, escaping into worlds of fantasy and adventure, and cherished the simple joys of childhood, playing games with friends and exploring the world around her. But as the Nazis rose to power, casting a dark shadow across Europe, the world she knew, the familiar streets and comforting routines began to vanish, replaced by fear and uncertainty. Prejudice crept insidiously into playgrounds and friendships, poisoning young minds and creating divisions where none had existed before. The Franks, witnessing the escalating persecution, realized with growing dread that they could no longer stay in Germany, their homeland. In 1934 they fled to Amsterdam, seeking refuge and hoping for safety, a new beginning in a more tolerant land. For a while, Anne found new friends, building connections with the local children, learned Dutch, embracing the new language and culture, and rediscovered happiness, finding joy in the simple things once more. She thrived at her Montessori school, excelling in her studies and blossoming into a confident young girl, and explored the city by bicycle, feeling the wind in her hair as she navigated the charming streets of Amsterdam. But in 1940, the dark clouds of war gathered once more as Germany invaded the Netherlands, shattering their fragile peace. Anti-Jewish laws, cruel and discriminatory, stripped the Franks and other Jewish families of their rights and dignity, marking them as pariahs in their own land. They were forced to wear yellow stars, a symbol of hate and oppression, branding them as outsiders and targets of persecution. Amsterdam, once a haven of hope and freedom, became a cage, its streets patrolled by soldiers, its atmosphere thick with fear. For Anne, on the brink of her teenage years, a time of dreams and aspirations, fear and uncertainty replaced freedom, casting a long shadow over her youthful spirit. The world was closing in, the walls tightening around her, and the life she knew, the carefree days of childhood, was slipping away, replaced by a grim reality. The Franks faced a terrifying choice: hide, disappear from the eyes of the oppressors, or be taken, deported to an unknown fate. The shadows that had chased them from Germany, the spectre of Nazi persecution, had finally caught up, threatening to engulf them entirely. Anne's childhood was over, stolen by the forces of hatred and intolerance. A new, unimaginable chapter filled with fear, uncertainty, but also resilience and hope was about to begin. The summer of 1942. A summer that began with the promise of warmth and light, but quickly descended into a period of immense fear and uncertainty for Jewish families across Europe. It brought a chilling wave of terror to Amsterdam's Jewish families, as the Nazi occupation tightened its grip on the city. The freedoms they once knew were systematically stripped away, replaced by discriminatory laws and the ever-present threat of deportation. When Margot received a call-up notice, a summons to report for so-called labour in the East, the true horror of their situation became undeniably clear. This wasn't just about restrictions anymore, it was about the systematic removal of their people. The Franks knew with a chilling certainty that it was time to disappear, to vanish from the face of the Nazi regime, to seek refuge from the storm that was about to engulf them. Otto Frank, a man of foresight and careful planning, had prepared a hidden space behind his office, a secret annex, for just such a desperate moment. He had hoped this day would never come, but he was ready. It was a refuge known only to a trusted few, the secret annex. Under the cover of dawn, the family slipped through the quiet city streets, their hearts pounding with each step. The risk of being seen, of being caught, was ever present. They were wearing layers of clothing to avoid suspicion, carrying only what they could manage, leaving behind almost everything they owned. Each item left behind was a piece of their former lives. Anne left behind her beloved cat, Müller, a painful sacrifice that symbolized the abrupt end of her childhood. With each step away from their home, they left behind the last traces of her old life, the familiar comforts and freedoms that now seemed like a distant dream. Behind a seemingly ordinary bookcase, a clever facade designed to conceal their existence, a narrow, steep staircase led to their new world, a world of confinement and constant fear, but also of hope and resilience. It was a world that was cramped, silent, and secret. Soon the Van Pelt's family, close friends of the Franks, and dentist Fritz Pfeffer, also seeking refuge, joined them in hiding. This meant 8 people living in extremely tight quarters, sharing limited resources and enduring the psychological strain of constant confinement. Daytime meant absolute silence was essential. Every sound had to be muffled, every movement carefully considered. Even a cough, a sneeze, or a dropped object could mean discovery, and discovery meant certain death. They lived by the rhythms of the outside world, listening to the sounds of the city, trying to discern any changes that might signal danger. They were completely dependent on a few brave helpers, like Müller, who risked their lives to bring them food, supplies, and news from the outside. The outside world, once so vibrant and full of life, gradually faded to a distant memory, a world they could only glimpse through a small window. The annex became both their prison, confining them to a small space, and their refuge, offering them a chance to survive. For Anne, a young girl full of energy and restless curiosity, the confinement was particularly challenging. The silence, the lack of freedom was suffocating, a constant reminder of their precarious situation. Every creak of the old wooden floors, every accidental whisper was a risk, a potential trigger that could alert the authorities to their presence. The rules were strict and unforgiving, designed to minimize any chance of detection. The fear was constant, a heavy weight that pressed down on them day and night. Yet, even in this hidden space, filled with fear and uncertainty, Anne's spirit refused to be crushed. Her determination to live, to learn, and to express herself remained unbroken. She began to find new ways to express herself, pouring her thoughts, her fears, and her hopes into the pages of her diary. She wrote with remarkable insight and honesty, even as the world outside grew darker and more dangerous. The secret annex, with all its limitations and challenges, was their only hope for survival, and their greatest test of resilience, courage, and the enduring power of the human spirit. Survival depended on absolute silence, unwavering trust in one another, and the courage to endure the unknown, to face each day with hope despite the overwhelming darkness that surrounded them. For her 13th birthday, Anne received a diary, a lifeline in hiding. She wrote to an imaginary friend, Kitty, pouring out her fears, hopes, and frustrations. The diary became her confidant, a place where she could be truly herself. Anne chronicled daily life arguments, hunger, and the ever-present fear of discovery. She also explored her changing relationships, her dreams, and her longing to be understood. Writing was her rebellion against silence and despair. "I want to go on living even after my death," she wrote, a wish that would echo through history. Her diary was more than a record. It was her voice, her hope, and her legacy. In the suffocating quiet of the annex, Anne's words soared beyond the walls. Through her writing, she claimed a freedom the Nazis could never take. Life in the annex was a cycle of monotony and tension. Mornings demanded silence. Afternoons brought brief relief when they could speak and listen to the radio. The radio was their fragile link to hope, each broadcast a lifeline. Food was scarce, tempers short, and privacy non-existent. Arguments flared over scraps, but small celebrations, birthdays, holidays, became acts of defiance. For Anne, the lack of solitude was hardest. She found sanctuary in the attic, gazing at the sky and a chestnut tree, a glimpse of freedom. The outside world was reduced to distant sounds and fleeting sunlight. Yet, even in confinement, Anne's curiosity and resilience endured. The annex was a crucible, forging bonds and testing spirits. In that small space, Anne's inner world grew larger than ever. Fear haunted every moment in the annex. A sudden noise or a knock could mean disaster. The threat of discovery was constant, the tension unrelenting, yet hope persisted, fueled by radio news and dreams of liberation. D-Day brought a surge of optimism. Anne dreamed of returning to school, of becoming a writer. The residents swung between despair and hope, clinging to small joys. Anne's diary captured this emotional rollercoaster terror one day, beauty and love the next. Her ability to find light in darkness made her spirit extraordinary. In the face of terror, Anne's hope was an act of defiance. The duality of fear and hope defined their hidden lives. Even in hiding, Anne's dreams soared. She longed to be a writer, inspired by a radio call to document the war. Anne began editing her diary, shaping it for the world to read. Her bond with Peter Van Pels deepened, offering comfort and a taste of normalcy. Despite everything, Anne clung to her ideals. "I still believe, in spite of everything, that people are truly good at heart." Her compassion and hope refused to be extinguished. Anne's spirit remained uncaged, her words a testament to resilience. August 1944 marked a devastating turning point. After 2 years of hiding, the secret annex was betrayed, its location revealed to the Nazi authorities. The consequences would be catastrophic, forever altering the lives of those within its walls. German officers, acting on the tip, stormed into the building. The sounds of boots and shouts echoed through the narrow corridors, shattering the silence that had been their fragile shield. The 8 residents, the Frank family, the Van Pels family and Fritz Pfeffer, were discovered, their carefully constructed sanctuary now a prison. They were immediately arrested, their faces etched with fear and disbelief. Their world behind the bookcase, once a haven of hope and normalcy, was shattered in minutes. The illusion of safety evaporated as the Nazi officers ransacked the annex, seizing their possessions and their dreams. They were sent first to Westerbork, a transit camp in the Netherlands. This was a place of holding, a temporary stop on the road to unimaginable horrors. Then, in September, they were crammed onto a transport to Auschwitz, the infamous extermination camp in Poland. The journey itself was a descent into hell. It was the last transport from Westerbork, carrying its human cargo towards an unknown and terrifying fate. The journey was brutal, a harrowing experience that tested the limits of human endurance. Days and nights blurred together in the darkness of the cattle car, with no food or water to sustain them. The air was thick with fear and despair. Upon arrival at Auschwitz, families were torn apart in a cruel selection process. Men were separated from women and children, their bonds severed in an instant. Anne, Margot and Edith were forced into the women's camp, where they faced starvation, disease and the constant threat of death through forced labor. Edith, weakened by the harsh conditions, died in Auschwitz, her spirit broken but her love for her daughters unwavering. Her last strength was spent caring for her daughters, trying to shield them from the horrors that surrounded them, a final act of maternal sacrifice. As the Soviet army advanced, Anne and Margot were transferred to Bergen-Belsen, another concentration camp in Germany. There, conditions were even worse than in Auschwitz. Overcrowding, starvation and disease were rampant. A typhus epidemic swept through Bergen-Belsen, further weakening the already malnourished prisoners. Death became an everyday occurrence. Despite the unimaginable suffering, the sisters clung to each other, finding solace and strength in their shared bond. But their bodies, ravaged by starvation and disease, could not endure the relentless onslaught of suffering. Margot, weakened by typhus, died first, succumbing to the disease that had claimed so many lives. Anne followed days later, her spirit extinguished just weeks before the liberation of Bergen-Belsen by British forces. Freedom came too late for her. She was only 15 years old, a young life tragically cut short by hatred and intolerance. The world lost her voice, silenced by the horrors of the Holocaust, but not her story. Her diary remains a testament to the resilience of the human spirit and a powerful reminder of the dangers of prejudice and discrimination. The betrayal of the annex remains a mystery. After the arrest, the Gestapo ransacked the hiding place, discarding Anne's diary as worthless. Helpers Miep Geers and Bep Voskiel rescued her writings, hoping to return them to Anne. Anne and Margot's final days were spent in Bergen-Belsen, ravaged by typhus and starvation. Both sisters died in early 1945, just before the camp's liberation. Anne's death at 15 silenced a voice full of hope and wisdom. The future she dreamed of was stolen. Yet her words survived, hidden in a desk drawer. The world mourned the loss of her light, but her story was not over. Of the 8 in hiding, only Otto Frank survived. Returning to Amsterdam, he learned the fate of his family. Miep Giers gave him Anne's diary, the legacy of his daughter. Reading it, Otto discovered Anne's depth, courage, and dreams. He fulfilled her wish by publishing the diary in 1947. Anne's words gave a human face to the tragedy of the Holocaust. Through her story, millions have felt her hope, her fear, her longing. She reminds us that every victim was an individual, a life that mattered. Her diary is a warning against hatred and a call for compassion. Anne wanted to live on after her death, and she has. Her voice, born in silence, now echoes across generations. She asks us to remember, to hope, and to build a better world. Through her words, Anne Frank endures.